Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here this morning and continue your input in the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. My name is Laura Levisner-Miller. I will be facilitator for today's meeting, and we're looking forward to getting started. So before we start, just checking to see if we have any community members in attendance. We don't yet, but these meetings are open to the public, so we might have some community members join us this morning. They will be in listen-only mode. We're also encouraging comments at any time through our project inbox, and Haley will drop that into the chat. As a reminder, we do record these meetings and post them live on the project website for anyone who is unable to attend. We do have several new technical advisory group members, so we just wanted to pause at the beginning of this meeting for introductions, and we can go ahead and start with our project team. Dave, would you like to kick us off and then pass it off to the next person?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody. David Sauer is Director of Terminal Engineering Construction for Washington State Ferries, and I will hand off to Hadley.
Good morning, Hadley Rodero. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Customer, and Government Relations at Washington State Ferries, and I'll turn it over to Marcia.
Good morning, I'm Marcia Tolan with the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Services at Washington State Ferries. I'll hand it over to Mark.
Thanks, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Mark Bandy. I'm part of the consultant team that's supporting the project for WSF, and I'll hand it over to Trevor Sharp.
Trevor Sharp, Operations, Washington State Ferries, and I'll hand it over to Ed.
Thanks. Hello. Ed Thomas. I'm part of the consultant team. I'm the project engineering lead.
Thanks, Ed. Haley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Haley Nolan, and I'm on the consultant team for communications and outreach.
And Sophie?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here. My name is Sophie Muja, and I am also part of the consultant team supporting outreach and communications.
Thank you. I think that is everyone from our project team. Move over to our tag members, starting with Aaron.
Sorry, did Charlie get to introduce himself?
Charlie Torres, are you? Yes, Charlie, you're on the line. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, here I am. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name's Charlie Torres, and I'm the project manager for this Washington State Ferries.
Forgot the most important person. Goodness.
Yeah. Leading the ship. Thanks, Charlie. Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Aaron Halbert. I'm a financial analyst with the Washington State Transportation Commission. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Aaron. Amanda?
Sorry, was that me, Jacob?
Oh, go for it, Jacob.
Sorry, Jacob Brett, King County Metro.
Hey, thank you. I was inviting Amanda to introduce herself. Might not be able to join the audio, so we'll come back to her. Chris Arkels.
Hi, Chris Arkels, King County Metro Government Relations, and I'll pass it off to our remaining Metro person, Steve Crosley.
Hi, everyone. Steve Crosley, Transit Integration Program Manager at King County Metro. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. David?
Hi, David Fort, Kitsap County.
Thanks, David. Jessica?
Hello, Jessica Olmsted, King County District Manager for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources.
Laura?
State Fish and Wildlife Habitat Biologist.
Thank you. Matthew?
Hi, good morning. Matt Vinci. I'm the fire for Vashon Island Fire Rescue.
Thank you. Penny?
Penny Kelly with Department of Ecology. I'm the 401 project manager for this one and transportation liaison with Department of Ecology. Thanks.
Rod?
Finally figured out where the buttons were. I'm Rod Malcolm. I'm a biologist for the Suquamish tribe.
Thanks, Rod. Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon Kelleher with the City of Seattle, Seattle Public Utilities, and myself and Shanti Caldwell, who also works for SPU, will be tag teaming representation here.
Great, thank you. Sharon?
I'm Sharon Love with Federal Highway Administration.
Thanks, Sharon. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Lilly with Kitsap Transit.
Okay, I think that's everyone. Did anyone else not get a chance to introduce themselves?
Sorry, I'm going to go ahead. I didn't realize I have to actually unclick two different buttons when I'm connected on the phone as well. So I was speaking to myself earlier. Sorry about that. My name is Amanda Say. I'm with the Seattle Department of Transportation. I'm with the interagency programs as a project manager.
Great, thank you. Glad you got the audio working. Okay, our next slide here is just an overview of today's agenda. So we will be sharing our design renderings to provide a better sense of what the dock look like in the context of the surrounding area. And then we'll be spending most of our time discussing our concept to improve the intersection of Fauntleroy Way and the terminal. So really looking forward to your input here before we move forward with any changes to the intersection. I see, Hadley, we still have our service contingency plan on our agenda here. We didn't plan to get into details on that, but I know we can send the link out in case you're interested in viewing some of those details.
Yeah, I can mention that up front, Laura.
Thanks, Hadley, and I'll turn it over to you to walk us through where we're at with the project timeline.
Okay, well, before I launch into this project timeline, just a note of something that provides a little context to this project. Last month, Washington State Ferries released its service contingency plan, which is an update of a plan we've been following since COVID that outlines some of the constraints that the ferry system is facing to prevent us from restoring full ferry service system-wide. And one of the routes that hasn't been fully restored is the Fauntleroy Vashon Southworth route. So it's been running on 2 boat service instead of the full 3 boat service for a couple of years now. And the plan, which I'll put in the chat in a minute, and we released publicly, shows that we're probably not going to restore full 3 boat service in the next several years, at least full time. We'll be adding a 3rd boat to the route as often as we have the crew and the vessels available to do so. So it's just a little context for this project that the Vashon community in particular and Southworth customers are really feeling a lot of operational constraints and have been having reduced service for a couple of years, and they've been focused on working with us on how to make the best use of that 2 boat service and deal with the operational impacts of that, which is sort of preventing them understandably from fully engaging in this project and is going to mean that we don't have a way of looking at the terminal operating as it's intended to with 324 car ferries consistently. So it's just something to be aware of, and that you may hear from community members and constituents about as we move forward with this process, as that's happening in the background. But let's jump back into this project. The slide on the screen shows the timeline. We're still in the planning and environmental linkages phase of the project, the Pell study. We're in the level 3 screening process. When we met last fall, we shared the refined set of alternatives that we're focused on right now. And we're now working through doing the analysis in several different areas that will allow us to screen that set of alternatives to a preferred alternative that will then carry forward for further environmental review under NEPA and SEPA. So the goal is to complete the level 3 screening by the end of this year, identify a preferred alternative, and complete the Pell study in 2025, and then move into the next level of environmental review, and then design and construction after that. So that's where we're at today. This is another graphic representation of the process. We did level 1 and level 2 screening over the last several years that narrowed us into the existing dock location in Fauntleroy with an alternative that's roughly the same size as the dock we have today, and then alternatives that are larger than what we have today. That was the outcome of level 2 screening. And then we further refined those 2 general alternatives into a set of alternatives that have different size docks and different footprints. And we're at the process now where we're going to begin evaluating those refined alternatives before selecting the preferred alternative at the end of Pell. So before we move forward, any questions on the process or where we're at, what we're looking to do today? Okay, well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bandy, Ed Thomas, go away, to talk through our alternatives.
Thanks, Hadley. A reminder again for everybody, Ed Thomas, Project Engineering Lead. So at our last meeting, we discussed the alternative summary, which sets the foundation for how we are evaluating the alternatives. And I'd like to start by running through the alternatives graphics that we shared during the last meeting. Starting with alternative A replaces the dock at a similar size as the current dock and maintains the existing wing walls and dolphins. This alternative has 4 holding lanes, holds 76 vehicles on the dock, and is 85 feet wide, which is about 18 feet wider than the existing dock. Next is alternatives A1, A2, and A3. These are nearly the same size as alternative A, except they are approximately 40 feet longer than the existing dock and include new wing malls and dolphins. These options have 4 holding lanes, hold 84 vehicles on the dock, and are 85 feet wide. Alternative B is a longer dock, and it lengthens the dock by about 240 feet more than existing. This option has 4 holding lanes, holds 124 vehicles, and is 85 feet wide also. Alternative B1 is also a longer dock. It's similar to alternative B, but has an added vehicle holding lane to the north. B1 holds 155 vehicles on the dock, is 94 feet wide, and this is the largest widening that we have on the north side of the dock. Alternative B2 is approximately 250 feet longer and 36 feet wider than the existing dock. This option has 4 holding lanes and adds 2 shorter holding lanes to the south, further out over water. At its widest point, B2 is 103 feet wide, but near shore the dock narrows to 76.5 feet wide. And this alternative holds 155 vehicles on the dock. Alternative B3 is the same configuration as B2, but has 1 less holding lane on the north side and is slightly shorter than B2. This option is 66.5 feet wide near the shore and 93 feet wide out over deeper water. And this option holds 124 vehicles on the dock. Alternative C, again, is the same configuration as B2, but has an added holding lane on the north side. It's 240 feet longer than the existing dock. It's 85.5 feet wide near shore and 112 feet wide over deeper water, and holds 186 vehicles on the dock. Now, moving on, since our last meeting, we've developed design renderings to help better visualize the differences between each alternative. These show conceptual finishes based on Washington State Ferry's new Mukilteo terminal. The intent of these renderings is to show the dock footprint and general layout for each alternative. And we will seek community input on the look and feel of the terminal later in the design process. So this first view is taken from the King County Pump Station and helps show what each dock option looks like next to Cove Park. So the next three slides for A, A1, and B will show an approximate 13-foot widening to the north. And alternative B1 shows an approximate 22-foot widening to the north. Alternative B2 shows an approximate 5-foot widening to the north. Alternative B3 is narrower, and it's actually narrower than the existing dock on the north side. Then alternative C again shows an approximate 13-foot widening to the north. This next view is from Cove Park, and these next few slides show how the alternative looks from the beach. This view also provides a perspective of the elevation change of the dock. If you notice the dark gray band that runs the entire length, that is representative of the deck elevation. From this view, you can also notice the difference in the pile density compared to the existing dock. Okay, this next view shows the look and feel of the new dock from the pedestrian walkway. The walkway width shown is 7 feet wide, which is the same as on the current dock. This should give you a relative perspective of the various lengths and widths of the alternatives. Okay, this final view is from Captain's Park, and this offers a good perspective to visualize the differences between each alternative configuration. And these first three, alternative A, A1, and B, are the same configuration, 4 holding lanes, and they have a dedicated motorcycle and dedicated bicycle lane. They're on the north. Alternative B1 adds the 5th holding lane there on the north side. And then these next series show the actual partial holding lanes that are added to the south. And on the north side, for the first length of Trestle, you'll notice that there's a shared motorcycle bicycle lane. and out over deeper water, it widens into a dedicated separate motorcycle and bicycle lane. Okay, with that, I'll hand it over to Laura.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, just pausing to see if there are any clarifying questions about any of the graphics, if anyone has any questions or comments, and we can certainly go back as well to review any of the images that we just showed. Yeah, Penny.
I just wondered if at this stage, and if I missed this, please forgive me, but what kind of feedback have you gotten from the community? Because your timeline shows all this community engagement. So as you've gotten to this level 3, has there been any feedback from the community on this? Because I know as a resource agency that focuses on water quality, I'm digging some of those B alternatives, just getting things further away from the shoreline. And of course, there is community maybe about that park, but I just wondered if you guys could share anything you've heard back from the community. Let me lower my hand too while I'm thinking of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had our community advisory group meeting last night, and I've had a lot of engagement. So Hadley, I saw you come on screen.
Yeah, I mean, in short, we continue to hear pretty even feedback favoring the same size as A alternatives, keeping the dock the same size, and then support for a larger dock, even alternative C. So it's still pretty split, and not surprisingly, the neighborhood, Fauntleroy neighborhood, and our community advisory group members who represent the West Seattle side of the route really want to have as minimal change as possible and keep the dock the same as it is today. And then the riders, the customers from Vashon and Southworth want the larger dock and really are hoping for a lot of operational improvement. So our discussion with the CAG last night, we presented the same slides. We didn't ask them for their preference yet, but we talked a lot about the operation of the different alternatives. And I think we saw sort of general understanding of these alternatives and how the biggest impact that they were concerned about was Cove Park. And most of these alternatives minimize or completely avoid impacts to Cove Park, which most people seem happy about. And then it really came down to how the dock was configured and access for different types of customers and vehicles like motorcycles and bikes. And that was the focus of their conversation last night. So I wouldn't say we're hearing consensus either way yet from any community members, although we haven't really asked for it because we're so early. We're not really there yet where we're asking to screen between the alternatives. I don't know if that helps you, Penny, but that's sort of where we're at with the public.
Yeah, that's just helpful. Just trying to get a sense of what different people are looking at. And I would think a big one for the community is also cars on the streets versus getting cars off the street. So I wasn't sure, if those bigger options.
They said that. So you'd think that, but most of the comments we're receiving from the Fauntleroy community favors the same size dock or the smaller, the alternative A1. And they have made a point to say they're okay with the cars on the street staying how they are today. So that hasn't really been a big comment that we've heard from the folks who prefer the small dock. They'd rather see the facility stay the same size. But we have heard a lot of interest from the customers of getting off the street and being able to be on the dock and through the toll booth, and more of that customer experience that you know which sailing you're getting on and you can see the boat and you can turn your car off. So we've heard that from the folks who favor the larger dock, but less from the community.
Okay, so just one more question, and then I see someone else has a question. I was just wondering, did you get a sense of what the main thing was for the existing community to keep it the same. Was it, I thought I heard you say it was lessening impacts to Cove Park, but it looks like all of your alternatives do minimize impacts to that park. So I'm guessing that, you know, this was a chance to say all of our alternatives are keeping that in mind. But I just wondered if they were able to really clearly articulate why they really preferred things to stay the same. Did you get a sense of what that might be?
Not yet for certain, but the issues they brought up are impacts to Fauntleroy Creek and the larger footprint. That creek has a pretty strong advocacy group that works with the Fauntleroy Watershed Association. The Cove Park continues to be an issue, and there's a lot of community members who've expressed that even the what is it, up to 20-foot widening that Ed showed, some of those alternatives that bump into Cove Park is pretty controversial, and a lot of them are expressing concern of why can't we leave it exactly how it is rather than even that minimal widening. Still, they don't like very much. I think a lot of it is just the scope and scale of the facility, and they're wanting it to remain small and in the context of their neighborhood is the general sentiment. But the creek and Cove Park are the two comments that we hear much more consistently.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and then we have, I guess the other thing is we do continue to get a pretty high volume of input from all community members, and there's a lot of interest and some level of controversy over the project. But Chief Vinci, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess just a question. Well, comment first. The renderings are really helpful. Nicely done. Thank you. In terms of emergency vehicle parking, it didn't look like there's any new designated space for that. Whether it be we're staging ambulances to either come on or go off from Vashon or Southworth, and in the event of a larger scale emergency where we have to evacuate a large amount of people and vehicles, if we had a fire on a boat, is there any considerations in the new drawings for designated emergency vehicle, whether it be staging to get on the ferry, off the ferry, and or moving patients and equipment for real time emergencies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Ed, do you want to speak a little bit about the design? And then I'm wondering, Trevor, if you'd like to speak to the operational element there for prioritizing emergency response vehicles.
Well, the one thing I can mention is that all of these alternatives have a dedicated emergency vehicle / ADA lane that is 12-foot wide, and it's usually one of the first lanes here on the left-hand side. And then I think it would be a input from Trevor here to explain how they may be staging those vehicles.
Yeah, so usually what we try to do is we've gone away from having the carpool diamonds and stuff like that at the terminals, so we can utilize those lanes. But for emergency vehicles, we still have those basically marked. We know, like in the scenario that they're showing right now from Captain's Park, that lane 1 is the one that we'll be staging the emergency vehicles in because it's the wider lane, and it's easier to pull them out to get them up to the front if they do end up in line.
So nothing in addition to what you're currently the operations that you're currently working under. There's no additional designated space because that lane, as you probably know, is, and our staff can tell you, is full pretty regularly, and we have to pull up front, and sometimes there's issues with getting the boats unloaded, especially if it's a category 4. Then getting people moving even quicker. There can be some issues with, and again, I don't want to get in the weeds here a little bit on operations. We work really well together, but I just was curious if there's any consideration in any of these new models for additional space for emergency vehicles.
I don't believe for going over to Vashon. I'm not usually used to patients going over to Vashon. I'm usually used to them coming off. But I do know that you guys still do your transfers and stuff up there in the triangle, and we do try to get you back in the lanes. And then if you guys are in the lane, we try and pull you out and get you as close to the front as we possibly can.
Chief, are you talking about your aid cars returning to the island, which I know is an issue that you want to get them back as quickly as possible? Or are you talking about when you need mutual aid coming?
Both, Hadley. Yeah, both scenarios. You know, what happens more often, 500 plus times a year, is going back. But you know, I guess as a kind of a general question was the consideration of additional designated emergency vehicle space, or are you really just pressed for space to get cars on there, and there's just you know, no new space for emergency vehicles?
Yeah, there's not really any new space for vehicles or for emergency vehicles.
But the priority loading WAC would still apply, so your vehicles still have priority loading status returning to the island, so they would get on the boat. How they get there, I guess, is an operational decision that we'd make, right, Trevor? How you get them down to the front.
Correct. And when they finally select, when they finally get close to selecting the alternative, the operations team will sit down and we'll plan operations on each design that you guys have to see what works best for us.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments before we move on to the intersection? Rod?
Yeah, I'm new to this whole process and all the background to it, but I was wondering, the ferries that use this terminal, where do they berth at nighttime?
Yeah, great question.
Let me answer
Trevor's
that.
anxious to jump in.
Yeah. So we basically berth two of them. Well, right now it's a 2-boat schedule. So one will berth at night over at Vashon. And because we have a crew switch over, the other one will berth at Southworth. Ideally, they'd all three of them would berth at Vashon overnight. But right now they have one berth in at Southworth because of the early morning crew hours.
Okay, that answers that question there. I do have a lot of comments about the trestle and transfer span replacement project document dated January 24th, and I will get those out in writing. But so, okay, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We appreciate that. Stephanie.
If I can make my mute button work. Hi. I think these renderings are absolutely beautiful, and I know this has been a struggle of a project to get the community to adopt it. Having built a few over water coverage facilities recently, you know, we understand the desire to get the boats as far out in the water and push the infrastructure as far out as possible. However, I just want to make sure that you are really considering the pedestrian walk for your folks that are taking public transit or walking to or from. So when you are looking at this, making sure that it's not being too unreasonable for some of those folks. We might think 50 feet's not that far, but it could be a real struggle. So the further out in the water you get, that is something that you should really consider is the pedestrians.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. That's something we'd heard from community advisory group members as well. Ed, do you want to speak a little bit about the process of how we'll be considering that in the design?
Yes, yeah, regarding that distance and passengers with mobility issues. As the design progresses, the intent is we're going to coordinate internally with the Washtenaw Regional ADA liaison for input on elements that we can incorporate into design to accommodate.
No, I think that's great. The one thing I would highly recommend is maybe portion of the way down benches, just so that if you have somebody that is a little slower, needs to take breaks, you've got that built in.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Stephanie. And back to Penny's question earlier, I forgot about this. This is another comment we've heard from pretty extensively through the public outreach, is that some of those docks, the B alternatives that go longer, they're concerned about the distance between the transit stop and the road and the end of the dock to get out there to the terminal building. Both from folks with mobility challenges and ADA perspective, but just in general.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we do have some additional time later on for Q&A, but we'll go ahead and move on to the intersection. Dave, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. Let me introduce the next part of the presentation, and that is the intersection at the head of the dock at Fauntleroy Way. So a key part of our purpose and need statement, and we've talked about in previous meetings with you all, is just to improve our overall operational efficiency at the terminal. We've talked at length about the size of the dock is about 2/3 of the size of the capacity of the boats. We've talked a little bit about pickup and drop off. We've talked about staging for bikes and peds and all of that. So within all of that is our goal is to make the terminal work more efficiently. And one of the things that we're looking at right now is how could we manage the intersection better, especially now that we've announced the Triangle Route will be on 2-boat service for at least the next few years, if not longer. In order for us to maintain our headways and process the vehicles off the boat, and as well to address the safety concerns that I think have been out there for many years, long before this project showed up. The idea of signalizing the intersection is taking root. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Mark Bandy's going to present some options for how we would propose to do that. We have teed this up with Amanda on the phone and SDOT management. It is a city street. So of course the city would have a role in reviewing and approving this, but we're really trying to find some win-wins here. We want to avoid illegal left turns from the right lane. We want to avoid, just people yelling at each other and the conflicts that exist between drivers, as well as providing movements for bicycles and pedestrians as well. And at the same time, one of the big things we heard yesterday, in addition to support for this, was how do you deal with the north-south traffic on Fauntleroy Way and continue to provide the through movement that's needed for the local traffic when there isn't a boat in the slip. So with all that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to kind of walk us through what we've been talking about.
Great, thanks, Dave. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So as Dave said, we've been looking at this in the context of, a reminder about the purpose and need for the project is to improve operational efficiency and for reliable service, and also safe and efficient loading, primarily obviously around the ferry terminal operations. But that also includes at this intersection for people who are crossing the intersection, crossing in this crosswalk on the right side of the graphic, crossing Fauntleroy Way to either get to and from the bus stops, or passengers that are walk-ons or walk-offs from the ferry. And so that's really what this is kind of being in response to. This is showing the current configuration out there today. One of the things we've heard about this intersection is from all three communities, interest in identifying some ways in which the operations and safety could be improved. And so this is really kind of in response to that. We looked at a variety of options for how the signal might be done at this intersection. As part of the evaluation criteria, we were considering operational efficiency and safety, but we also included footprint and cost as a criteria, because we did have a consideration of at least one configuration that did a widening for a second northbound lane. That obviously would have increased the footprint and costs of the project, or the intersection treatment. And so we figured that was an important consideration to add. And so that's in our screening criteria. As they've mentioned, this set of options was considered and discussed with the city. And we've kind of solidified on moving forward with recommending signalization of the intersection in its current configuration, which means not widening the intersection or adding any lanes. It's the current lane configuration. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So this is a mock-up of what the intersection could look like, schematically, with a notion of where traffic signal poles might go. Sorry, I forgot to touch on back to the previous slide. Wanted to go back and cover, if you're not familiar with how this operates today, this is a stop-controlled intersection from the ferry terminal coming out. But there are times that an off-duty officer is scheduled to operate the intersection, and wanted to identify a few reasons that we aren't recommending that be a continued solution. One issue is that the times when ferry volumes are high do fluctuate and make it difficult to schedule an officer. So that, of course, means there are times when an officer is not there and there's a higher volume of traffic departing the ferry. I mentioned the pedestrian crossing, Fauntleroy Way itself. That traffic can be busy at certain times that have no relation to the ferry terminal. So as people try to cross that crosswalk, they can face some busier times when it presents a conflict risk or greater conflict risk for them to get somebody to stop for them. Having an officer control an intersection like this, putting them in the middle of that intersection to control it, always presents a risk of them being hit, presents a safety risk for them. And so if you have that occurring on a recurring basis, you want to try to find solutions that don't rely on recurring personal interventions in a situation like this. And the last point is that having uniformed officers does require ongoing guarantee of funding and budgets to staff that, and then also the availability of officers to sign up for it and come out and do it. So for those reasons, it's not the long-term solution that we think a signal is going to basically be able to kind of manage the situation more effectively for everyone. Right, now let's go to the next slide. Okay, back to the sort of conceptualized signal. What we're showing here is, again, how the movements would come off the dock in the two black lines, left lane going left to go northbound, and the right lane going right to go southbound. We're also showing how the bike lane and pedestrian crossing movements would occur. Those we're thinking they would be in their own phase to separate them from the vehicle movements coming off the terminal. And then Fauntleroy Way, of course, would be served as it is today. Patterns to go to the ferry would be very much similar to the situation today, where it's predominantly southbound on Fauntleroy Way during the busier times. The northbound left turn would be prohibited. In the case of a signal, we could do that with basically an electronic sign that can be turned on or off for those times, lower volume times when that restriction doesn't need to be there. A couple of features of the signal, of course, would design it so that it has emergency vehicle preemption response, also support transit signal priority since the C line runs along Fauntleroy Way here. And then the other thing we would be designing it for is to have detection that can monitor when the ferry is arriving or not arriving, so that you're can time the signal to handle the different volumes that come off, but also not serve the ferry side when there's no ferry there, and also be tied to if the ferry is a bit off schedule, it basically only turns green for the ferry dock when there's a ferry actively unloading. And the last point I'll mention is it would be, we'd recommend it be tied back to the Seattle DOT's Transportation Operations Center, so that there's a remote monitoring and capability to modify the timing of the signal if needed. And that also facilitates coordination with the pedestrian signal that's further north on Fauntleroy Way at Cloverdale. And the last point, I think, before we go to Q&A is, as Dave mentioned, we've seen that this has independent utility. It doesn't relate to the size of the dock and the alternatives considered that Ed walked through. And so for that reason, we're recommending that we look at advancing this and doing this work to put the signal in prior to the larger dock replacement project. With that, I think we're ready for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. David, I see your hand is up.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? Question on the northbound. So left turn is prohibited onto the dock?
It is. There are times a day tend to be in the busier times when, actually, if you go back three slides, Haley, the picture, you can actually see it in the existing photo. There are, you see those in the lower left side of the graphic, there are, well, A-frames that are put up. So that's done for two reasons, and Trevor can add on to this if needed, but basically during busier times, that's to kind of maintain the, first arrive, first on situation, but also with a single lane going northbound on Fauntleroy, any vehicle that's turning left there basically blocks the entire lane. And so it's just more efficient to also have that traffic go up and then join the line southbound into the ferry terminal.
So that
at night, those are removed. And so what we do in the signal situation, David, is you can put a sign up on the signal pole mast arm and basically have it controlled by time of day or traffic conditions.
Makes sense as part of that. Now, how do you support U-turns for that northbound vehicle to get into the holding lane queue?
Yeah, so we actually heard comment from this from the community advisory group last night. Essentially, what happens is people will go north up Fauntleroy Way, and they will find a place to safely and legally do a U-turn and then join the end of the arrivals towards the ferry.
I'll put you on the spot. Where are those safely and legal locations?
Well, is unless per the way the rules of the road work, you can do it unless it's otherwise prohibited. So obviously what you need to be doing from a driver perspective is you need to yield to any oncoming traffic like you would making a left turn. So that's the way the rules of the road work. So you essentially can do it unless there's a sign there saying you can't.
All right. I'm just checking consistency in Northwest region traffic versus Olympic region traffic interpretations.
Well, it's people want to look it up. It's and you're as having a driver's license. If you've gotten a driver's license, you're supposed to know this. But it's 46.61 is the RCW that has rules of the road.
I mean, there's also some interpretation, something about 500 feet clearance distance. So that's what I'm saying. And just a question that comes up is, we can say that, but what is the interpretation for the driver actually being there, and as part of that? But thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Chris.
I'm not a traffic engineer or a transit expert, but I am a West Seattle resident, and so I like to observe things in real life. So I went out to Captain's Park last Friday. There's a lovely bench right above the ferry dock where you can sit on, and I observed 3 boats unload between about 3:30 and 5:30 on a very full boat around 3:30 coming from Vashon that had all the school children, so had a large number of pedestrians, and looked like it was a pretty full boat car wise as well, and a not very full boat from Southworth, and a half full boat from Vashon later on with not as many pedestrians. I did, I heard all the concerns about having a signalized officer at that location. I noticed that the officer was able to react to real life situations. Some of the things I observed is that officer was able to accommodate for pedestrians walking up and needing to either cross Fauntleroy to the bus stop on the other side, or to cross heading northbound across that. And when pedestrians needed to cross northbound across the ferry lanes, he was able to let Metro buses and cars progress. At the later boats, there was not very much car traffic on Fauntleroy, and so there was not a signalized officer there. It looked like the boat took about 9 to 10 minutes to unload. I didn't see in the report, it wasn't very clear how long the cycle would be. If WSF was was envisioning that they would unload the entire boat, that would be an unacceptable delay, I think, for Metro. It would mess up the sea line a lot to have a 10-minute delay. It did look like most boats took about 9 to 10 minutes to unload, even that very full boat, and part of that was the pedestrian movement. They needed to get over to the sidewalk. I don't know if that condition will change in the new design or not, but some things I observed. So I'm curious about how many cycles there would be to unload the boat. And I also noted that, if it didn't seem like cars were backed up getting off the boat, even on that very full boat. And if we do have a longer dock, it seems like there would be more cars also stored on the dock, and giving up more capacity there. So, and I didn't see any mention of that. Those are just a few observations from a layperson. And Steve and Jacob are here and have a lot more expertise on transit movement. So thanks.
You got it, Chris. Thanks.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for the observations and input. With respect to the traffic signal, the timing, obviously we need more design work, more iterations through what that would look like. But the notion is not that the expectation would not be that it is sitting there doing a 10-minute cycle of unload. But for a variety of reasons, there's essentially the flow off of the boat does kind of happen in some surges as well. But also, we know you mentioned movement along Fauntleroy Way for vehicles and as well as transit, but also pedestrians crossing. So, there will be the pet arrival movement that happens, bikes are at a different pace, vehicles. And so, what we talked through the community advisory group a bit last night is it kind of would run in a set of varying cycles. And so you kind of run a first phase, stop, let Fauntleroy go, let pet bike go, then run another phase for vehicles to come off. And obviously with the detection on the dock feeding the signal, that you can measure, basically you can use that to adjust how much time is needed and really just kind of be flexible with basically the relationship of ensuring that you can move some traffic off in the unload process to ensure that the transfer span then becomes available to do the load process, right? So that's that kind of relationship. And then, as you just observed, if the dock options are a bit longer, then there's just more distance, that the number of vehicles that get off, you can kind of vary that relationship between the unload green light time as well.
Well, that's good to hear. Not to be critical, but as a layperson, I found that report difficult to read because there was not a lot of the contextual information that you would need. How many cars are on a boat? How many cars the dock holds for unloading lanes? Whether there would be broken up cycles. It was all very vague on that. So, so that as we move forward, it'd be good to have more of that contextual information. I guess I'm just saying.
Sure.
Yeah,
I appreciate
that's
that,
really
Chris.
helpful. Thanks, Chris. Steve.
And I just wanted to bring in a little bit of the technical side here too. So Mark, understanding that this memo is qualitative in that we've been chewing on this for the earlier good part of the week, but understanding that it's qualitative and it's the first time we've seen it. So I think there is going to be a good kind of coordination effort with Metro to understand what that quantitative impact analysis would be. And it's good to hear that there's obviously kind of a open to different phases, because again, a full 9 to 10 minute delay for the sea line is unacceptable if we can pulse buses through somehow. And one thing we can bring to the table is what those passenger loads are like during different times of day to understand what passenger delay on the sea line would look like through here. Obviously, we're pretty close to the terminal, so it's not super high ridership. And at the same time, we do have 112 trips in both directions. So about 225 trips total going through here per day. So yeah, Mark, from a technical side, I think once you start getting into the nitty gritty and the quantitative, we'll really want to work closely with you and Washington State Ferries on what that analysis looks like. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve.
Can I ask a question? So when the boat is unloading, does Metro hold at that stop there on the right hand corner there? Do they hold there and wait for pedestrians, knowing that there's an influx of people coming off the boat, or do they just hit the accelerator and try to beat the traffic that's coming off the boat? I'm just curious how the drivers sort of handle this.
I was to say it depends. I think largely it's to the discretion of like where that bus is in the system and how fast we need to get that bus, because we want to avoid bunching, and the sea line is a frequent route. At the same time, if you see a bunch of pedestrians about to cross the street, I bet that operator will stop and allow those folks to board. So I think really, since it is a really long route and we have to maintain headways across the board all the way into downtown and to South Lake Union, we obviously do want to keep that schedule and keep those headways consistent. And at the same time, operators have discretion to really pick up those passengers.
Yeah, we had a lot of traffic engineers on the call last night from the community, as you can imagine. So that was fun to have that conversation. And one of the observations I made was by the time the pedestrians actually arrive at the intersection from the boat, there's a good portion of the traffic that has already exited the boat and more quickly left the terminal. So yeah, those are great things for us to delve into. Again, to Mark's earlier point, we're just very conceptual. We're trying to tee this up. We still have a lot of work to do. The length of the dock will kind of drive some of the signal timing, how much green time goes to each movement, for example, and whether it's a dedicated, the bike lane is a dedicated signal, or works with the pedestrians. There's a lot of things that have to be sorted out, and that's more to come on that.
Can I ask another question, Steve? For these further conversations, it'd be also helpful to hear from Metro and the operator's experience with when there is a traffic control out there now, a UPO, if it's working for them. Because my observation is they're holding the rapid ride now while they give priority to the offload. And I think that would be helpful as we look at the signal to know if today's method, when there is traffic control, a person there doing the traffic control, if that's working or if that's not even working today to keep you on schedule.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of questions for you. So if you have questions for us, please shoot them over, and we will certainly, we can't answer that because we're not in operations, but we can certainly find the right folks to answer those questions.
From my personal observations, by the time the pedestrians got up to the two crosswalks, there was enough pedestrians that he prioritized letting the pedestrians move, therefore stopping the cars, which allowed the bus to pass. So the bus was usually waiting there for like a minute or two while cars were actively unloading. But once those pedestrians got there, he was able to allow the bus to go by because the pedestrians were, not interfering with that movement. But so it's probably a mix, and it probably depends on the quality of the signaler and all kinds of things. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, just looking to see if we have any other
Mark,
Chris?
you mentioned TSP. Can you talk a little bit more about how you'd envision TSP working here?
Sure, Chris. I think what I was speaking to is basically designing for it to be connected and adaptable to TSP. But it's more details to come. I mean, I think there's, for some of the reasons that you were just talked about, is does a bus hold or not? But from the to be the southbound direction here, essentially, Chris, I know the city and Metro are working together in terms of that agency to agency transit signal priority at a almost kind of at a system level, as we think of it that way. And so it would basically be making sure that the infrastructure here is designed to enable that connectivity to happen, just like it does at a majority of other intersections throughout the city. So that's the idea. And there's a lot of different ways of treatments that then come under that capability. For example, you can think about extending or holding a green on Fauntleroy northbound if the bus is near to the bus stop, or it has just stopped and then you want to hold it so it advances through. That's an example that kind of might be considered here. It does then relate to obviously the topic that was just talked about waiting for passengers or not if you see them. So there's always kind of a complexity of thinking that issue through. But that would be what, as Steve said, we would be in the next phase talking about what does that look like? What are the operational aspects to that? And is it all the time, some of the time? Because again, that pattern varies.
Thanks.
That help, Chris?
Yeah. I'm just trying to understand things.
Yeah, I mean, if people don't know this, it's actually a good thing happening at the system level, which means by that I mean King County Metro knowing where its fleet is and the city having connectivity to all the different signals. That's a better way to happen for this to happen than some of the 15, 20, 30 years ago priority treatments where it was like an intersection basis and you couldn't kind of see the extent of the system.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Certainly coordination with Metro will be key on our list as this concept moves forward in design. More conversations to come. We just have a couple more slides here, and then we might be able to get you all out a bit early. So before we wrap up today's meeting, we just wanted to share a quick look ahead on what else our team is working on to get us to that next milestone of completing the level 3 screening and selecting a preferred alternative. And Mark is going to tell us a little bit more about the traffic analysis work.
Sure, thanks, Laura. So we know that lots of people are interested in seeing traffic analysis and how that then relates to the operational efficiencies and differences with different dock sizes, as well as advanced ticketing concepts, the application of good to go. So we've been working on developing a traffic model that represents the interaction of ferry traffic arriving, the loading of a vessel with the unloading process, and then what that looks like for different dock sizes in terms of the time to process, as well as the extent of queuing differences that would be out on Fauntleroy Way. We've been working on basically calibrating and understanding a variety of the inputs into that, from vessel capacity, typical processing times at the booth, the frequency or time between load and unload, and that dwell between routes. So all those things are being fed into the development of that traffic model. And so coming up both with the CAG and then the TAG, this group will be showing those results that then will help support the evaluation criteria that are related to those operational efficiency criteria. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Marcia.
Thanks, Mark. So he's given you an overview of the traffic analysis. we're also evaluating environmental considerations to complete level 3 screening. And this includes reviewing overwater coverage and in-water aspects of the proposed alternatives, as well as which means the number of piles. But we're looking at how each dock alternative could impact environmentally sensitive areas, including fish and eelgrass habitat. And so then we'll review those findings and from this analysis at our next meeting before we complete level 3 screening. So I'll pass it back to Laura.
Okay, that wraps up our meeting. Are there any other final questions about any of this upcoming work or anything else we discussed today? Penny?
I was looking at your the materials you sent ahead of time, which included the presentation, and there is a level 3 criteria table right there at the end with how you know the colors for ranking. Do you want any feedback on that after this meeting to just as we go through them and just email the group that the thing that my brain is not thinking of, but is the email, I think, thing for the group where you provide for us to do comments.
Penny, the attachment I sent yesterday is what we were considering the final version of the document we shared at the last meeting in October and discussed and have received some feedback on, but we're obviously more than open to additional comments or feedback you have on it. It was the alternatives memo, I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah. And I just didn't know if you wanted any additional feedback. It has the graphics and everything, and there was the criteria at the end. So that's all.
Yes, we'd love any additional feedback because we're moving toward, as Marcia just mentioned, we're working on all of this analysis that's then eventually going to feed into informing that screening criteria, doing the screening. So any feedback on the criteria itself would be super helpful at this point, or anything else in that memo.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Okay, so these are our next steps. Some of the topics we'll be covering in our upcoming meetings, including reviewing the environmental and traffic analysis results before sharing the draft good to go and advanced ticketing study results. And then we'll move into the level 3 screening process before selecting that preferred alternative. We're also planning on broader community engagement, community meetings later this spring, and we'll be sharing those with you all to help get the word out as well. Hadley or Dave, any other final comments before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I don't have anything. I just appreciate everybody being here and taking some time out of their day to listen to what's been going on. And obviously, we're going to get together again in a few short months, and we'll have even more to share there. And just thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Really appreciate all the feedback.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.